Hi, I'm Tessa, a veteran educator working in the field of special education.
And I'm Kim, mom of 2 autistic boys and a late diagnosed autistic person myself.
And welcome to Totally Over the Spectrum, where we dive into embracing autism through understanding and support.
Hello and welcome to episode 36, where we're talking about autistic non-speaking challenges.
Yes, and as always, please share your thoughts and comments with us. We love hearing from you. And don't forget to like and subscribe. All right.
Okay, I've broken this down into 2 categories.
Okay.
So challenges for the individual who is non-speaking, and then challenges for the caregiver of the individual who is non-speaking.
Yes. And this is our perception of it because, you know, it's hard to articulate on behalf of somebody who is non-speaking, right? So to the best of our abilities, these are a lot of commonalities in which a lot of people express in regards to working with or parenting or providing care for somebody who is non-speaking.
Yeah, and I also go online and look for live experience of people who might have been non-speaking when they were younger, and sort of gradually their communication changes as you get older. Mm-hmm. And also there are people who are non-speaking who very adeptly use other means of communication and can express their feelings. So I also go online and try to find some lived experience for that. And then for myself as a caregiver of a child who is non-speaking, Peter is my youngest, he's level 3 and he's non-speaking. I can say with firsthand experience what it's like as a caregiver.
Yeah. So that is an amazing opportunity for us to share that information, and me as providing respite care for him, and also dealing with, an array of students, also is able to give perspective from that situation too.
Yeah. So the first thing I'd like to do is start with some terminology.
Okay.
So why use the term non-speaking instead of non-verbal? It was non-verbal. It is more of a... They use the term a lot when you're talking to medical people. They'll use the term non-verbal. But I find that most professionals who work with autistic individuals also still use the term non-verbal. So why do I choose to use the word non-speaking? And the reason of that is because I think words matter. And non-verbal essentially means without words. And I think that's inaccurate. And being autistic, I like accuracy. So non-speaking means that the person has words. They just might have challenges with speaking them.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. Yeah, the terminology does need to change. But when you're in a clinical setting, there are certain boundaries in which they place to use the terminology non-verbal.
Right. And I think that should change in medical settings as well. I think that it's an important distinction for clarity and understanding, that just because a person doesn't speak doesn't mean that they don't have language. Peter is not mute.
He is not. He has other means of communication and does that very effectively.
Exactly. So the next terminology I wanted to talk about, just because we're going to be referring to this throughout the podcast, is receptive language versus expressive language. Mm-hmm. Receptive language is basically our ability to understand and interpret verbal and nonverbal communication.
Yes.
And expressive language is the ability to communicate our thoughts and ideas, wants, needs in verbal or nonverbal ways. So yes. An easy way to think about that is receptive language is input and expressive language is your output.
Yes, absolutely. There's, language can also be communicated with gestures and facial expressions, not just speaking, right?
Exactly.
So we'll hopefully touch base on all aspects of it as much as we can and make it this as fluid as possible.
Okay. So let's start with the challenges that an autistic person who is non-speaking might face.
Well, the first one that comes to me is you or I or anybody else interpreting the nonverbal cues that they are presenting to us.
But that would be as a caregiver. So let's start with the person who is non-speaking. And let's start with what their challenges would be. So my first one would be communication barriers.
Okay.
Right? So a person who is non-speaking might have limited to no access to spoken language. So that would make expressing their needs and thoughts and feelings difficult.
Yeah. And usually that can also increase a lot of behavior because of the frustration that comes from not being able to articulate their wants or needs accurately.
Yeah, and I mean, there are other means of communication. So they might rely on augmentative and alternative communication, what we call AAC, and those kinds of devices, which are tablets that have programs on them that facilitate language, that might speak for them. You push buttons and they can form sentences, and depending on their skill level, it could be with pictures or with words. And that machine, that device, is basically that person's voice.
Yes, it is. And that I think we've spoken in our previous episode about being very respectful when working with a person or providing care to a person that is non-speaking and accessing their device without their consent or permission.
Yeah, exactly. And that might not be universally understood or accepted.
Yeah.
So that can make it very challenging for the person.
It does. It does make it very challenging for them and frustrating. And, and when we do speak about some strategies, then hopefully we'll bridge that gap.
The next one I have is misunderstanding and stigmatization. So autistic people who are non-speaking are frequently misjudged as lacking intelligence or awareness. Just because you cannot speak does not mean you cannot understand.
Yes. So it goes back again to the discrepancy between the receptive language and their expressive language, right? So once again, just because a person is non-speaking does not mean that their level of understanding and comprehension is not at par of their age, or sometimes even higher, because now they have, used other forms of in order to express their needs and wants.
Yeah, so they might understand everything that's going on, but be able to express things themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings us to limited autonomy. So decisions are often made for that person rather than with that person because people underestimate them.
Yes. Yeah. Which is really sad, isn't it? That we don't give them the choice of this or that, right? Depending upon the circumstances and the situation, sometimes for safety purposes, you're going to say you don't get a choice in the matter. But when it comes to communication, there should always be that choice.
Yeah, it must be very, very difficult in asserting consent or non-consent when you're having difficulty expressing yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And having people take away that choice for you, it must be very devastating.
It is, yeah.
And like you said, that brings us to emotional frustration, right? Like that internal stress from being able to communicate with that person effectively.
Yeah, it does. And I think when that happens and you get that level of frustration, you kind of go like, why am I going to try? And that leads most people down a path, a rabbit's, burrow or whatever. And you just kind of lose faith. And I think a lot of isolation occurs as a result of it.
Yeah. I have also that you could be misunderstood when you're expressing distress, but also when you're expressing joy.
Yes, I think a lot of people misunderstand the cues, right? With this facial expressions. And and that comes down to more of our aspect of being the caregiver or the care provider in understanding those.
The next one I have is sensory challenges.
Yes.
Autistic individuals often have high sensitivity to noise, light, textures, all the things, and that can exacerbate stress and anxiety. And if you have limited means to express your sensory overload, things are going to get bigger.
Yeah, they become magnified, absolutely. Which is unfortunate. And I'd like to be able to have, get some strategies put into place in order to remove that barrier as much as possible.
And the next one I have is educational and social exclusion. You mentioned social isolation. These kids are often placed in overly simplified or segregated educational settings. And that's where Peter's at right now. His program is overly simplified. He's certainly able to do more, but he's learned that if he puts up a little bit of a fight, they will back off. So he doesn't have to get pushed.
Yeah, I was his arch nemesis because I always stretched those boundaries to the point where I knew it was growth, but not to the point where he was distressed and it was no longer learning and no longer fun, right? Whenever I introduced something new to him and he knew it was going to be work, he expressed his dislike. And I looked at him and I go, I understand you're frustrated by this and you don't like it. So we're going to take it one step at a time and we're going to learn it little by little. And then once he got over the emotional aspect of this is overwhelming, this is, I don't want to do this, this is hard work, the protest of it. And I'm going, take your time, feel what you need to feel. And when you're ready, we're still going to do this.
And that's the difference between pushing and stretching.
Yes, absolutely. So, it's just letting Peter know that, hey, it's okay to feel the way you're feeling. It's okay to protest. And we're still going to learn.
Yeah, so, you're not ignoring what he's saying. I think people might get the wrong impression that you're ignoring his wants and his needs. No, children don't always get to say, I don't want to do that, so I'm not doing that. That's not life. Life doesn't work that way, right? They could say, I don't want to make my bed. That's never going to happen. Well, no, that's a life skill that you need to learn to do. Mm-hmm. It's not just because you don't like it. Hey, maybe nobody really likes it. Still have to do it. You still have to brush your teeth, whether you like it or not, right? Self-care is important. So that's just to put in that distinction for people who might think that you're pushing him to do something, but he's telling you he doesn't want to do it and you're not listening. No, there is a line.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And when it comes down to academics, that's, in pushing that growth, it's like, hey, we're going to introduce learning money to you. So I'm giving you an example for this on where those boundaries were pushed. And the importance of learning money and numbers is so the different aspect of life skills. Okay, I understand numbers. So now I can navigate a bus system. I can learn to look for a bus stop. I can learn to look for a bus number. I can read a timetable. And I'm able to navigate and be able to get from point A to point B just by the fact of having a good basis of numeracy, which can then be tied to learning money, okay? And the concept of money and going shopping. So, the importance of the foundation is there. And I'm just giving you examples of how this is important.
The other part of social exclusion is sometimes when we're in these environments, there are limited opportunities for genuine peer relationships.
Yeah, I have that as well. I have that as limited experiences on many different levels in relationship building with peers, in work opportunities, in social interaction opportunities. So yeah, I have limited experiences as being one of the challenges.
And then the last one I have is medical and legal vulnerabilities. Difficulty reporting abuse, neglect, mistreatment, right? If your expressive language is low, how do you communicate that these things have happened to you?
Yeah. And to be quite honest, these are not like if you use an ACC device, it's not often that, these words are entered into it unless you're having, you've got to be able to have a parent or a caregiver advocate for you and provide you this information into your device.
Yeah. So you might have limited words like hurt and only hurt. And then you have to sort of manipulate that word to describe someone that hurt you, not that you are just hurt.
Yes. And I'm feeling sad and I'm feeling hurt versus somebody actually did something to me, an action that occurred. Yeah.
And then the last point I have of that is there could be challenges accessing appropriate health care and being involved in medical decisions.
Often those decisions are made for you, right? And that was one of the key points that we brought up right away, is that people make decisions for you when they believe that you're non-speaking.
Yeah, they think if you're non-speaking, you don't understand. That's basically just sort of a generalized concept that people have.
Yeah. It is very unfortunate, and like you said, there's a lot of information out there of people who are non-speaking that use devices, and their receptive language is so much higher. And then when given the tools in order to express that, it's amazing of the outcome that is provided.
So let's talk about the challenges for caregivers for autistic people who are non-speaking.
Well, like I said, I think the first one right out, like I had expressed earlier, is the interpretation of those nonverbal cues, right? The subtleties that we as typical provide, and the subtleties are not always the same as a neurodivergent person does, right? So getting to really stop and see the subtleties is what is the challenging part for most people, because people just kind of go, oh, I saw this, when really they didn't, right? They missed the subtle cues that are often created and produced.
And Peter's very subtle in his expression sometimes. Like, you knew very quickly how to read his body language. Mm-hmm. And I think for most people, they would miss a lot of things.
And I can give you an example on a situation in which reading the subtleties of that body language. So it was the very first day that I was introduced to Peter and yourself, and was said, this is a high flight risk student, coming from an enclosed area for a recess to now a playground and an open field. And I was like, okay, great. But I had to give Peter the opportunity to display those skills or those subtleties for me so I could learn them, so I could, and place those boundaries of what is safe and what is not. And so I gave him free reign of the playground and positioned myself, and I watched him, right? I had my sunglasses on, but I watched him very, very carefully. And I noticed that if he looked in a direction 2 or 3 times, that's the direction he was going in. And he would be on the monkey bars or whatever, and his head would be facing, but his eye gaze was in a certain direction. That was the subtlety of him giving me the direction in which he was going to be going. And guaranteed, sure enough, as soon as he got off the monkey bars, he beelined it in that direction.
And he's quick.
Yes, he is. So, so the next time we put those boundaries into place, and I said, I'm watching you like a hawk every moment. So make good choices. Because if we do not make good choices, then we do not get to enjoy the freedoms in which you're having right now. So we set those boundaries the very first day, and he only made one additional attempt after that. And when the consequences of his recess was taken away from him, to think about what he did, it never happened again.
Yeah. And the thing with you being able to read his body language, you knew it would take 2 or 3 times of looking, and you would stop the behavior before it happened.
Yes.
Which was really important.
Yeah.
So you would see him start looking, and you'd be like, I see you.
Yeah.
I'm watching you.
And my famous phrase with him is like, don't even think about it. Right? And he'd be like, oh, God, this woman is like, it's too much. This woman is always watching me. Yeah. Or I'd go, excuse you.
Yeah, and that's my favorite. I picked that up, and I have actually transferred that line to so many people that I've come in contact with.
Yeah.
Excuse you. And it's amazing because it's unexpected.
Yeah.
So communication challenges and interpreting those nonverbal cues. I think the fact that I'm also autistic made this easier for me, I imagine, than someone who is neurotypical having an autistic child. I think everything must be a little bit harder for them. Because for me, all of the behaviors make sense. And a lot of the time I relate to them. So I have that innate understanding of what might be going on, even when Peter can't tell me what's going on.
Yeah, I think you have that advantage. Yes, for
Yeah.
sure.
So
Yeah.
I imagine for a neurotypical caregiver, they might be just lost because if there is a high pitched noise, they might not even be hearing what I'm hearing. And I'd be like, oh, yeah, are you upset? Me too, because that's terrible. But a neurotypical person might not even notice that it's happening.
Yeah. What's going on? Why
Exactly.
are you upset?
So
Yeah.
I think that's made everything a lot easier for me as a caregiver. The other thing I have under communication challenges is I have to learn and support these augmentative communication devices. Like I've got a learning curve. I happen to like technology, so it's not terrible for me. But if you're not into it, that there is a huge learning curve on how to use these devices and how to implement them and
Yes,
support them.
It is. It is a lot of work from somebody who uses it on a regular basis, especially in the introductory phase of this device, and making it something that is seamless and friendly and non-invasive. It's difficult, right? And because at first there's this huge pushback. It's like, what is this thing? It is work. I like, it's too much work to go there and press all of these buttons. It's like, you got pushback. And then all of a sudden one day, you continue with this device consistently, silently, non-invasively, and then all of a sudden one day the student goes over, picks it up and goes poo poo poo, and then you celebrate that. Oh my God, finally, right? That, oh yay, we've got one step forward, right? And once that switch flips in our students, they're off running with these devices, right? But to that point, and sometimes it can take days, sometimes it can take weeks or months or even longer. So the process can be a very long process in order to gain success in using a device appropriately and actively and consistently.
Yeah, everybody is on their own schedule.
Oh, yeah.
And you can't rush it.
No, you cannot. So huge learning curve? Absolutely. Trying your patience? Absolutely. Right? So you've got to pack a lot of patience when doing this.
The next challenge I have is emotional strain on the caregiver, right? Stress from advocating in all of your systems, right? Your education system, your healthcare system, your legal system. And those places are not always supportive and inclusive.
No, they're not. And it takes a lot of mindfulness to be a caregiver who is processing the information that is being provided, not only for yourself, but for the person that you're with, and then translating that information to the person that is non-speaking and have that interaction occur and then relay that information back to a person who is not familiar with dealing with a person who is non-speaking. It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. And you have a lot of parties involved, right? There's a lot of therapies and stuff. So you have to learn to speak the language of all of these different therapists. You have your occupational therapist has their own language, and the speech and language pathologist, and the physical therapist, and the school has its own language, and healthcare language. Because if Peter is sick, he can't tell me what's wrong. Mm-hmm. So just going to the doctor and the doctor saying, oh, well, how do you know that he's in pain? I've had them ask, how do you know he's in pain?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? But that's a great question. How do you know that he's in pain? What effective words and descriptions can you provide me to indicate that your child is in pain? So it gives you a perfect example of how much work it is for you to process all of that information that's being presented to you, analyze what's being said, understand your child and be able to articulate what your child is feeling and the nonverbal or non-speaking cues that they're providing us to be able to be valid to a healthcare practitioner to say, yeah, that's the cue for pain.
And that brings me to physical and mental exhaustion of the caregiver.
Yep.
Right? The high levels of caregiving responsibility, it's often 24/7, and you don't have as much time for self-care, certainly not for personal goals or rest, right? You're always on.
Yep. And I think this is an opportunity for one of the strategies, I would say, is using a respite, right? To refuel and recharge yourself. We've spoken about this in our previous episodes, which we will be happy to place a link in order to help you navigate through this. But it is exhausting, right? I, do it as a job, and mine is Monday to Friday, for 8 hours. But I, at the end of it, get to go home and unplug, where parents do not.
Yeah. And then the next one I have are the systemic obstacles. So apart from learning and all of these languages that you need to speak and talking to all of these coordinators, difficulty accessing services to begin with, right? Like I'm talking about it like everybody gets these services, but they don't. Like setting up these services can be incredibly difficult and incredibly time consuming, and there are wait lists for things, and then you add in trying to get funding to pay for all of these things, and then finding the appropriate supports for your individual child. It's
overwhelming.
And then the paperwork involved, because I hate paperwork, is astronomical. The amount of paperwork involved in doing all of these things, and data tracking, and then being able to sift through that information and relay it to the appropriate people. Yeah, navigating bureaucratic systems is so time consuming and demoralizing. It's a lot. It is a lot.
And you start to see that sense of hopelessness filter in on you. And, your neurodivergent child is so in tune to those nonverbal and non-speaking body language cues that they pick up on that despair. And then you can, that high level of empathy from them really, really, attaches. And, you see them come down with it too. So yeah. It's sad. It's really sad.
Talking about funding and those sorts of things, we talk about financial pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Raising kids is expensive. Raising autistic kids, especially non-speaking autistic kids, it is so incredibly expensive. All of these therapies, all of these tools that you need, all of these extra items that you take for granted when your kids are autistic, but sensory items, right? The learning strategy tools, like everything costs money.
It does. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is overwhelming.
And then you could have specialized education and even healthcare items that you might need, right? Like Peter was in diapers until he was 10. Diapers are expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an extra at least 7 years of diapers that most people don't have to think about.
Yeah. It's a lot.
Often one caregiver, if you're in a family of two parents, I'm a single parent, but one caregiver might have to reduce the amount that they're able to work or give up working entirely.
Which makes the financial burden even more substantial.
Exactly. And the next point I have is social isolation. So when you are a 24/7 caregiver, the reduced social opportunities due to those caregiving demands can be significant for people.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also a lack of understanding in your community, right? Right? Friends, family, or just neighbors, anybody.
The relatability is reduced even further.
And sometimes people can be really good and they want to learn and support. And other times people are just like, oh, well, why don't you just come by? Why don't you just get a babysitter? Why don't you just... I can't just hire a babysitter. I would have to hire a respite worker who is trained to understand. Right? I can't leave Peter with anyone. That's not fair to him, and it's not fair to that person. They're not going to be able to understand his cues. They might not understand the difference between Peter being happy and Peter being hurt.
Yep. You're right.
Peter doesn't always cry when he's hurt.
No, he doesn't. No, you're absolutely right. He does a lot of pacing.
So that's sometimes it's just easier not to bother. That's too much work to go out and try to force social interactions when you're not getting the support that you need anyway. So it can be very isolating for people.
It can, but I think it is an important fueling mechanism, right, for yourself. It's a lot of work initially, but I think once you get everything in place, I think it is absolutely crucial for your well-being in order for you to function, to be able to provide care for your own child.
I think for a lot of people it is. I'm an introvert, so I'm pretty good with just being home alone, not talking to people.
And you're autistic too, so...
I like to make things, so most of those are solitary things. I prefer them to be solitary things. And truth be told, I do have a small, close network of friends. And I wouldn't want a larger network of friends. I wouldn't be able to keep up with it, just as my own personality and autistic traits. So I'm good. I'm good. I have enough people.
Okay.
That brings me to my last point, which is long-term concerns as a caregiver. So you worry about what will happen when I'm no longer able to provide support.
We actually had a podcast about that one.
We
and
did.
It was, I think, one of the most dysregulating moments that we've had. It just, I could not think, I could not express, I could not do anything navigating a couple of those podcasts between guardianship and alternative living. That was very upsetting for me. But it is the reality of the situation, right? So the long-term, projections have to be taken far more seriously than most other people.
Yeah, it is going to be extremely difficult as that time approaches to be able to find trusted, appropriate, long care solutions.
It is. And for those who'd like to get more information on that, please tune into our podcast. And I'm sure you'll be happy to put a link onto that too.
Yeah, I made notes where we've talked about other podcasts. I made notes this time so I don't forget. And I will put links to those. So if you are here at the end of the video, the links are always there at the end of the video to the next ones.
Yeah. So I've got also another aspect of this, and I think strategies that help, right? So early intervention is key, right? In order to cope in the short term and long term, right? So I think please, early intervention is crucial into being able to provide the best opportunity to reduce frustration for your non-speaking child. And also early intervention is going to help you put in strategies in place that you can build on as your child matures and you start to deal with, hormones and all of those that come with, growing up.
Yeah, I'm just going to add to that because I think it's important. Early intervention, I think we're really specifically talking about getting a speech and language pathologist.
Yes.
Because people think, because it says speech and language, people hear speech and they're thinking, well, non-speaking, you may or may not learn or be able to speak, but that's not all that communication is. So a speech and language pathologist is going to actually help with communication. And that's communication for the autistic individual, but also as a caregiver, learning to communicate with your non-speaking child.
Yes, they are the bridge builders between the two. And, and you need to do your due diligence on finding the right fit for your child, right fit for your family, and right fit for what is needed at that time. But early intervention is key. Sorry. The other one,
And early intervention is like at age 2. Like as soon as you know, basically, let's start.
yes, please, because I see the significant difference.
There are studies that have been done, right? That say early intervention is key.
Yes, absolutely. So we're stressing upon the early intervention over here. The other aspect of it, as we've touched based on it, is creating a supportive environment, right? Within your home and within your community. That is going to be key. So these are a couple of the strategies that I know are really, really important earlier on in order to build that bridge, build that gap, and obtain success.
Supportive doesn't mean that your child always gets to do what they want to do when they want to do it. And I know that caregivers are exhausted and every day is more work. I get it. I understand. I do it. But putting in that extra work when they are little is really, really helpful for when they are getting older.
Yes.
So when they're 2, not when they're 6'2".
Yes, that's my go-to phrase. It's deal with the behavior now. The behavior is the lack of being able to express wants and needs, right? There is always a reason for the behavior. Understand it, put the tools into place, and in order to give them to be able to provide you that connection of understanding earlier on so you can build on a strong foundation.
Kids are naturally more resilient. So working with young kids and stretching them outside of their comfort zone is easier for them when they're little.
Yeah.
They're elastic.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they are. They don't break. I promise you, they don't.
Yeah. And I know that it's hard when you know that this is going to cause an emotional outburst and you don't want to deal with that today. So it's very easy to say, okay, I don't want to deal with that emotional outburst today, so I'm just not going to stretch those boundaries.
But in doing so, you inadvertently set that precedence for what that behavior is now. That is it. You've set the precedence for what that behavior is going to be like. So it's going to take you a lot more work to go back to where you were than to actually muster up the energy to deal with that behavior then and there. To say, no, it is going to be, this is not,
hard.
it is, I know it is extremely hard and exhausting, and I feel for you.
And you're not alone.
No, you're not alone.
Right? We have a Facebook page. I always put a link to our Facebook page. You're always welcome to leave comments here. You're always welcome to share your stories and find that community where we've been through it.
Yep.
We have maybe some strategies for you that can help in your situation specifically. Please always reach out.
Yes, we are always here for you and happy to share the information.
That's why we started doing this.
Yes. Yep. All right. What else have you got on your list?
That's it. I'm done.
Okay. Well, I think in just talking about, we've spoken a lot about Peter, but you also have Alex, who is your level 1, right? And there is a huge distinction between, or maybe not, you might surprise me, between, parenting a level 1 versus a parenting a level 3. And I think that would be a great conversation to have on our next podcast.
Then that's what we'll talk about.
Okay. Well, until then, take care and have a great day.
We'll see you then. Thanks for tuning in. If you know someone who might find this episode helpful, feel free to share. Also, check out our website and socials linked in the description.